Hi guys, Dr. Rob Barrington here with some more nutrition advice. I've talked a lot about anxiety before. I've done a number of videos on, for example, 5-hydroxytryptophan. I wanted to talk again about anxiety, but I wanted to talk about it from a different angle. Anxiety is a normal phenomenon. It's a normal physiological response to stress. Everybody suffers from anxiety at some point in their life. The problem is that some people seem to be very highly sensitive to particular stresses, and those people seem to go throughout their entire life, every day, on a daily occurrence, having this anxiety response. Some people do go through periods of their life where they're anxious and then it clears up, and a lot of people, and I think a lot of experts, don't really understand what causes anxiety or how to treat it. And so those people that suffer from it are really left to their own devices. There doesn't seem to be a medical treatment for anxiety, and many people with anxiety end up treating themselves and trying to find strategies to cope with their anxiety. Having known a number of people that do suffer from anxiety, I do see that it does affect people's lives. So anything you can do to reduce those people that are sensitive to anxiety, anything you can do to reduce the anxiety is going to improve the quality of your life considerably. I've talked about 5-hydroxytryptophan before, and I've talked about boosting serotonin levels, and those are quite commonly looked into strategies. What I wanted to talk about today was alcohol, sugar, also allergies, and caffeine. And these are four particular triggers that can be very commonly the cause of anxiety in those people who are sensitive to it. And it does cause anxiety as well. These triggers do cause anxiety in those people who are not sensitive, but they just don't feel the effects so much. And therefore, I think avoiding or managing a strategy around these four quite common triggers can often be a very good base to start from if you have anxiety and you want to treat it. If we look at caffeine first, caffeine is quite often cited as a trigger food for anxiety. And even those people who don't suffer from anxiety, those are people who aren't sensitive to it, can become anxious after they've drunk coffee. And that is thought to be related to the caffeine to some extent. Some people are hypersensitive to caffeine, and those people should really not drink caffeine. Some people seem to tolerate it much better, and some people with anxiety find that caffeine has no effect. So this is somewhere where you have to experiment. But generally, I would suggest that coffee is likely to increase your anxiety levels if you're sensitive to anxiety. And the reason for that is that caffeine is a known trigger food for anxiety, because the anxiety response is a stress response, and caffeine causes the release of catecholamines, which are stress hormones. So it's biochemically understood how caffeine could cause and increase anxiety. Of course, people often put sugar in their coffee as well, and we'll come to sugar later. But sugar as well can be another factor that if you drink coffee and you have sugar in it, that can be another factor that can actually cause that can actually trigger anxiety. Now, tea is a little bit different to coffee because it's chemically different, it's compositionally different, and it also contains an amino acid called L-theanine. Now, I've talked about L-theanine before, and I've talked about L-theanine in relation to anxiety. L-theanine is an amino acid that's found primarily in tea. There's really no other sources of L-theanine in the diet. And L-theanine modulates alpha brainwaves. It increases the alpha brainwave state, and that's a calming state. That's an awake and a calm state. So tea actually has and the L-theanine in tea actually has an antagonistic effect against the caffeine. So tea sometimes is actually beneficial for anxiety, and some people find that drinking tea is actually beneficial at helping their anxiety if they're sensitive to developing anxiety regularly. So what I would suggest with caffeine is, if you do have anxiety and you suffer anxiety, if you think you drink a lot of coffee, that may be one of the causes of your anxiety. So have a look at reducing your coffee intake or eliminating it. You can also try eliminating your tea intake if you drink a lot of tea. However, if you don't drink tea and you suffer from anxiety, drinking tea may actually be beneficial. So it's one of those things you really need to experiment with. I would suggest that avoiding coffee is one of the things to try, and drinking tea may also be helpful. Of course, L-theanine is available in supplements, so if you find that tea is helpful but you don't want to drink tea, you could actually get an L-theanine supplement, and I have done another video on that, and if you look at my YouTube channel you will find my video where I talk about L-theanine anxiety. So caffeine can be a bit of a double-edged sword, so it's one of those areas you have to experiment with. If we come to alcohol, alcohol can be another trigger for anxiety, and really most people who drink heavily know that the next day it affects your emotions. It does actually make you more depressed. It can actually increase anxiety, even in those people who aren't susceptible to suffering from anxiety. So avoiding binge drinking is a good strategy, and if you drink regularly and you suffer from anxiety, it may be that the alcohol is actually causing that. Alcohol obviously has a calming effect when you drink it. It tends to be the after effects of the alcohol that actually cause the anxiety and trigger it, although drinking alcohol itself can trigger anxiety in some people. So again, it's another one of those areas that you have to experiment with, but it is a very common trigger. Moderation in alcohol is the key. Alcohol itself is actually quite healthy. It does have beneficial cardiovascular effects, and it does seem to have calming effects in some individuals, and it does seem to heighten anxiety in others. If you find that anxiety is, if alcohol is not a cause of your anxiety, I would suggest that moderate drinking is probably not going to be too detrimental, but bear in mind that you might be drinking alcohol and you think, well, actually I don't feel anxious now, but it might be the next day that you actually get an anxiety attack, and that might have been triggered by drinking alcohol the day before. Alcohol does affect blood sugar levels, and blood sugar levels have been investigated in terms of triggering anxiety attacks, and there is some evidence that when your blood sugar levels drop, that is a cause of anxiety. And the reason for that is because when your blood sugar levels drop, your body releases catecholamine hormones such as adrenaline, and they are some of the hormones that can actually be involved in the symptoms of anxiety. So there is a biochemical basis for why alcohol can cause anxiety, and I would suggest that those people that do suffer from anxiety have a look at your alcohol intake. I would start by eliminating it and try and go for a period of time where you don't drink, see how that affects you. If you drink quite heavily, for example, at weekends, and you find that you suffer from anxiety during the week, it might be that your blood sugar levels are being affected by your behaviour, so that's something else to look at. Sugar as well. Sugar can be a trigger food for anxiety. Now, sugar is really chemically sucrose. The problem with sugar is that it causes insulin resistance, and once you develop insulin resistance, you tend to have poor blood sugar control. And as I've just mentioned, low blood sugar is a physiological state that the body doesn't like. It likes to keep the blood sugar at a particular level, and once that level, once the blood sugar drops below that level, the body has a way of counteracting those effects, and one of the things that it does is it releases adrenaline, and this adrenaline then it really causes the release of glycogen into the blood, which raises blood sugar levels. So sugar in itself over the long term can actually be detrimental to those people who are very sensitive to anxiety attacks, and I would suggest that the best strategy for sugar is to eliminate it. And I'd say this for everybody, whether you suffer from anxiety or not, sugar is a very detrimental food for your health. It's a very insidious food. It causes its effects over decades, but once its effects have taken hold, they're very difficult to reverse, and I don't think sugar should be in anybody's diet. The one exception perhaps is athletes that train very hard, that require a certain amount of fructose following intense exercise, and that's the only real exception. It's the only place I really see sugar having a beneficial effect in the diet. Certainly those people with anxiety should bear in mind that sugar will detrimentally affect your blood sugar levels, and it's that lack of control in your blood sugar that can sometimes trigger anxiety. As soon as your blood sugar drops below a certain level, your body releases adrenaline, and adrenaline is involved in the stress response, and it's that response that can actually trigger an anxiety attack. Sticking with carbohydrates, simple sugars, processed carbohydrates, processed starches have detrimental glycemic effects. In other words, they also have this effect on blood sugar. If you consume simple carbohydrates, processed carbohydrates, white flour, white bread, you get a very rapid rise in blood sugar, but that blood sugar is the body also doesn't like high blood sugar levels, so you get a massive release of insulin. That insulin pushes the glucose in the blood into the adipocytes, into the skeletal muscle, and into the liver. That lowers your blood sugar levels. But what often happens is that the blood sugar levels drop too much, and that then is your trigger for anxiety. So consuming processed foods, processed refined carbohydrates, refined starches is another possible area that you could look at. And if your diet does contain those types of refined carbohydrates, switching to whole grains, whole grain rice, granary whole grain bread, anything that is processed is going to be a trigger for anxiety. So move away from those types of foods and into whole grains. Also, legumes are very good for controlling blood sugar, and increasing the protein intake of your diet is another very good way of maintaining a level blood sugar levels. And this is because protein stops it reduces the rate of digestion of starches, because it holds the food in the stomach for longer. So high protein diet and adding legumes to the diet are also very good ways of modulating your blood sugar. And this explains the weight loss effects of high protein diets and of legumes, because they allow the maintenance of blood sugar levels, and it's high blood sugar levels, it's high insulin levels, and it's the development of insulin resistance that causes weight gain. So high protein diets and high legume diets are very healthy diets, but they also may be beneficial to those people who have anxiety that's triggered by low blood sugar levels. Lastly, food allergens. Food allergens is a minefield. It's very difficult to identify food allergens. Even if you work with a nutritionist that knows what they're doing, it can be very, very difficult to identify and eliminate foods that you're allergic to. And of course, it might not be foods you're allergic to. It could be substances in your environment. The best person for reducing and identifying allergens is yourself. You have an understanding of your own body, and you will know what you react to. A basic elimination diet is a good idea for anybody who suffers from anxiety. You can find elimination diets and how to follow them on the internet. There's books that have been written about elimination diets. Basically, you eliminate nearly all of the foods from your diet except for some basic foods that you eat for a couple of days. These tend to be low allergy foods. So pears, for example, tend to be very rarely cause allergies in people. So you eat a number of foods that are generally low allergy foods, and you see whether your anxiety is improved. Then what you do is, at one at a time, you add foods back into your diet until you have an anxiety response. You then eliminate that food again, and then you include it again. And if you get an anxiety response, it could be that you are allergic to that food. Now, it doesn't have to be an anxiety response that you trigger. It could be, for example, eczema or some other symptom. So elimination diets aren't just for those people with anxiety. Therefore, linking foods and food allergies to a particular symptom, which is, many people suffer from symptoms that are totally idiopathic. You have no idea what's causing them, and people never really go down this route of these elimination diets, and they can be quite successful in actually identifying trigger foods in the diet that cause particular symptoms that up to that point you had no idea were caused by a food allergy. Most people think of a food allergy, think of an anaphylactic reaction, but food allergies can be very insidious and very, very subtle in their nature, and therefore you can go through your entire life having problems and not realizing that you're actually allergic to a food that you've been eating. And so elimination diets are something else to look at. There's many guides on the internet and guides in books for elimination diets, and suggest that if you do have anxiety or anything else that you can't find a cause for, an elimination diet could be worth looking at. And at the same time, clean up your environment. If you think there are things in your environment that are affecting you, they could be triggers for anxiety as well. So chemicals that you're exposed to, pollution, for example, things that you might use on your skin, they can be triggers for anxiety because they can be allergens as well. So there's 4 things that you can look at. Look at your sugar intake and your carbohydrate intake. class that as one area. Look at your alcohol intake, look at the amount of caffeine and the type of caffeine and the sources of caffeine that you're consuming, and also see if it's possible that it might be allergens that are causing your anxiety. And the best person to deal with this is yourself. People, you know your body much better than anyone else, and any doctor or any nutritionist would be able to guide you. But really, you have to do this detective work yourself, and it does take many years sometimes to be able to identify these triggers. But once you do, you can actually start to move away from feeling anxious all the time, and can actually improve the quality of your life. So I hope that was interesting. If you've got any questions on this video, or any other questions, please leave in the comments box below. As always, I will try to get back to you. I do try to answer all the questions, and I will see you next week for another video, and in the meantime, take care.